Hello, 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 and welcome to Developing on CockroachDB Office Hours. This is an AMA. Think of it as you can ask us anything. We do every week on Thursdays at 12 o'clock Eastern Time, this Office Hours, and it's meant to be a bit of a connector with the module on Wednesday at the same time, same channel, but you can ask us anything. So this week we talked about query optimization. We actually had Stephen Hand here. Alistair had to miss because of conflict, but he wrote up some demos based on that. So if we don't have any questions today, we will just play. I want to welcome you to this developer-focused success program with a series of workshops and office hours to help you tackle your biggest developer aspirations together as a team. We are assuming that you've got some SQL and Postgres experience. If you have taken Cockroach, user of Cockroach Cloud, bring us into your journey, help us learn what you need. We want to help you get the most out of the platform, help us improve your experience. And this is not the only channel of communication. This is one channel to become an excellent CockroachDB developer. Check out the links below. We've got Cockroach U, we've got community Slack, we've got forum. We've got a lot of resources that we would love for you to use. And in the meantime, we're here for your questions. Let's talk to our two experts. Steve Hand is an architect, an enterprise architect with Cockroach Labs. Tell us about your journey here, Stephen.
Hey, great.
Oh, I don't hear you. Maybe you, Alistair, can you hear Stephen?
Hey, can you hear me?
And now, yeah.
Okay, so
Okay,
I'm having sound.
great.
Stephen, go.
Okay, awesome. Hey, folks.
He's gone
Now,
again.
else who's tuned in. And yeah, my journey is that I was a software developer for 27 years. And I've loved all aspects of software development up and down the stack. But I gravitated toward databases relatively early on. I was always the person who said, please, I want to own the database part of whatever application we were designing. And as a result, I got a chance to work in lots of different databases over the years on lots of different interesting problems, both in the commercial retail software space and in operational support. And that includes just a whole variety of things. So yesterday I presented on query optimization, and that was fun. It was basically a friendly keyboard mediated conversation where I shared my keyboard and went through some cool topics about query optimization. And we're here just to maybe answer any follow-up questions you may have about that, or to answer any questions at all that you may like to talk about, whether it's about query optimization or something else that's relevant to your own development journey. We also have Alistair on, who will be able to show a cool performance testing scenario to answer the question, well, how do you know which queries that you want to tune? So all of that is available now.
Yes, and Alistair, let's hear about your journey to Cockroach Labs as well. Also an enterprise architect.
Yeah, that's right. I spent the best part of 20 years kind of making Oracle work for big companies, operating Oracle, and getting a lot of annoying stuff from developers like Stephen that they would push into production and try and destroy my databases.
Nice.
And that's why, and lots of query tuning. Yes, so this is a good point actually. That Cockroach is a very new technology. We only just recently had our 6th birthday as a company, but it's very familiar to anybody who's used any of the sort of main relational databases: Oracle, SQL Server, Postgres, MySQL. If you've ever created tables, if you've ever had to tune queries and make your workload work better on your database, then all of those techniques are relevant and absolutely necessary when you're tuning workloads for Cockroach. So none of that is wasted. If you've got that experience in the past, it's really useful, and that's what I hope I bring to my role is I help my customers, because Cockroach is new, but it's it's not that different, really. We still have the same problems to solve.
We're still using SQL.
Yeah, we are.
And I'm Rain Leander. I'm a developer advocate here at Cockroach Labs. I am the noob in the database world. My background is also MySQL. Back in the 90s, I was making websites on the LAMP stack. Literally knew how to install Linux, install Apache, playing with MySQL and PHP. So I guess that shows my age. But also, I'm the one asking the questions that you might be embarrassed to ask. So ask those embarrassing questions along with me, because I'm the noob that has the SQL, that is familiar with Postgres, but I am still definitely learning, and I am a Python developer nowadays, still figuring this out, and I'm excited to be here. We're gonna talk about anything today, including a possible demo of query optimization, which is exciting. We have about 5 people watching on average. They're super quiet in the chat. So why don't we go ahead and get started, Alistair? If you want to share your screen, I will get it out there.
Yeah, sure.
I'm also having sound issues. So if you're in the chat and you suddenly can't hear me, just say so, because woohoo. It's good times.
Yeah, so I was watching yesterday's session, and some really good stuff from Stephen there about how to tune queries. But my big question was at that point was, how do we know which queries to tune? Now, free tier is, as we've said before, really easy to get into, but is it easy to figure out what's going on if you run your application against it? And lots of sessions logged in. So I have 20.1.2 I see here installed on my. I can see the client version is different. This just brings out an interesting point here, that Cockroach Cloud, free tier in particular, is going to be patched up to the latest version. So if you've downloaded a version of Cockroach that you're running on your laptop, I'm just using it as a client to log into the free tier now, they will diverge, because this will get upgraded automatically in the background to the latest version on your free tier. So it's just warning me here that I've got a slightly older version, minor version here, and there may be, and in fact there is actually a little bit of problem there. Cannot show server execution timings, unexpected column found. That's probably because something's changed between those versions. So if I want everything to be really slick, then I need to download the latest binary and make sure that my server and client are the same version, even down to the same minor, and then I won't get any issues. In this case, it won't matter. I've run through this. It's all fine. And then you won't even get this warning that you won't even show you a client server. Just say, yeah, the version is this.
And aren't we expecting a major update soon too?
Yes, we are. So 22, we have 2 major releases a year. 21.1 was around April time this year. 21.2 will be coming out, I think it's mid-October. That's that's very soon. Yes.
No dates promised, but it's coming.
Somewhere in October, we think. Yes.
Exactly.
Right. So what have I got connected? So if I do show sessions, I can see what's connected. Now I'll see myself. There's my Cockroach SQL. And this is a good tip here. When you write your application, whatever you write it in, whatever language you write it in, set your application name, and then that makes it easy for whoever's administering this database, this Cockroach cluster, to figure out what it is. So here we've got a couple of sessions here with the TPCC workload. This is the same schema that Stephen was looking at yesterday for query optimization. So what's also, I mean, the Cockroach binary is fantastic, as well as being the client, running server for self-hosted. It can also generate workloads. It can generate example schemas. So if I just have a quick look here, this is typical Postgres syntax here, just describe what I've got in my schema. These are the objects that Stephen was looking at yesterday, and they were created automatically by me just running the Cockroach workload init and then TPCC command and attaching it to my free tier, and then I've got all these tables created for me. I got all these data loaded up for me. This is just the default to just one warehouse. In TPCC, you can load lots more warehouses and lots more of the other items as well. But I just did the basic default, and it created this sample data for me. And not only creates the sample data, but if I then run cockroach workload run TPCC, that's what created these sessions. So these two sessions are logged in here, and they're doing things. So you can see that's doing an update statement there. And that was its. This is what it did last. This one was doing a release of a save point. So they are. And if we run that again, we'll see that they are sort of doing different things. They're both on release save point there. You can see a lot of inserted to order there. So we can see that this is simulating an application logging into our free tier and running business transactions.
That's so cool.
So what I've set up here is, okay, so it's running various transactions. I can run this several times. I'm trying to figure out what it's doing. Are any of these taking a long time? Do I need to look at any of these queries? Are they a problem? Difficult to tell. So go on.
Can you automate, or you're about to show us? I just stepped ahead too far. I was like, wait, but can you automate this?
Well, what I can do, there are some internal views, just like most technologies, some internal views. So the CRDB internal node statement statistics will tell you what's going on in the background. And what I've done here, count is the number of times that a particular statement has run. Service latency average, that's the average time it takes to service that. So when Stephen was running his queries yesterday, he was getting a response time, just like I get a time here, how long it took to execute. So the average latency to run that, I'm timesing the two together to get how much time has this statement taken in total, no matter how many times it runs, how much sort of runtime has it got. I had to cast count to a float because I can't times an int times a float. So there was a little bit of casting going on there. And then in this case, I'm saying, well, there's a TPCC application. So I said earlier, it's good practice to set that application name here. So I can now just look specifically at that application. And then I'm ordering it by the first field, that total sort of execution time, and then limiting 10, just showing the top 10 basically. So let's have a look what that comes up with. So that's sort of showing me what is taking the time. And this is all of Cockroach's statistics by default are over the last hour. And this is actually the number of seconds. So it's times the average service latency is in seconds. I times it by the count. It gives me how much time that particular statement has been running in the last hour. So 16 seconds, 6, and just showing the top 10 queries here. Yeah. Now, I've been through all of these, and actually all of them look to me in here to be very well tuned. They are all using the primary key. There you go. So for example, this seems to happen a lot. I don't know why it needs to do this a lot, but it selects W tax from warehouse where WID is something, and WID is the primary key. We can confirm that by just doing a describe of warehouse. It's singular, isn't it?
Warehouse is your table. This isn't a data warehouse, is it? You know how you can have data lakes, data warehouses.
I think it's a warehouse, as in logistics.
The name of table. Okay, cool.
It's a storage place, I think. Isn't it, Stephen?
Yeah,
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, this is huge. It's running so well for being so huge.
And this is the primary key is WID. Yeah. So as per Stephen's advice yesterday, if we're selecting by the primary key, then we're going to do really well to get a better plan than that for most accesses. It depends what's happening, but yeah, that one's pretty good. And then the same with warehouse. Warehouse would also take a where clause, so it's WID. We know that. We just looked at warehouse. We know that it's all doing access by the primary key. So it might be taking time. It might be the top statement, but it's well tuned. It's just doing it a lot of times. And if we wanted to, we could split this out by how many times it ran and what the average service latency is and things like that. So we can figure out what's taking the time. So that I looked at it, I thought I could drop some indexes and try and make some queries look really bad, but that didn't. It's so well tuned, it forces everything to use the primary key on every single query. So that's so what I did was I pulled up another one. This is
nice.
this is another Cockroach Cloud instance. This is actually dedicated. I'll explain why in a minute. And against this one, I'm running a slightly different workload, the Mover workload. Mover is the kind of Cockroach demo application that we use in a lot of our examples and Cockroach University courses and things like that. So we'll do the same thing here. Show sessions. Ooh, now a lot more. Mover here is running. I can see the application Mover here. I can also see lots of sessions going in and doing stuff as Cockroach SQL. That's interesting. What's going on here? So I could run that sort of same query and have a look and say what's going on here. And just in this case, I know it's not just Mover that's doing things. I know there's some things coming in as Cockroach SQL. So I'm not going to put the where clause in and restrict it to a particular application here. I'm just going to do it for the whole. Oh my goodness. So by running that query, I could see that over the last hour, this particular query, this select star from users where name is like something, has had an awful lot more time than any of the other statements. So this probably is a good candidate for tuning. The rest are all much of a muchness. And I think that one, city's part of the primary key on that second one there. So even that second one's not really worth looking at too much. We definitely want to look at this one. So actually, I could see a real example of it because when I run here, it showed me what they were actually doing. They're all doing the same thing. Oh, what's going on here? There's the actual query with
the breaking thing.
Oh,
good.
Who's done this?
Love the breaking things.
So,
actually, Lurker, I love it. Lurker asked a question. Thank you for your question. This is an out there question. But one of the things that CockroachDB prides itself is that one of its limitations is the speed of light. Can you elaborate on what that means? And is it related to the speed of executing queries? Thank you, Lurker. Awesome.
It could be. It definitely could be. There is going to be the speed of light. It depends where your client is and depends where your Cockroach cluster is. If there's a gap, a physical gap between where your client is and where your there will be here because this is my laptop and this is in a data center somewhere in a cloud data center, so there will be some kind of latency. I think because of that incompatibility between my client and server versions, I'm not showing the split here between what the time it takes to get to the server and back and the time of execution. So speed of light definitely plays. Like when I first started using free tier, I was based in the UK. The free tier instance I was using was in mid-US. So it was taking 100 milliseconds there and back. So that's making things look slower than they really are. In terms of execution, Cockroach, as we've talked about on some previous sessions, we could distribute your database, your datas, all over the planet, and then there would be latency between the nodes of the Cockroach cluster. And then you might talk to one node I might talk to a node in London, but actually the data I need is in the US or in Tokyo.
Yeah.
So yes, it absolutely. If the Cockroach node you're talking to is a long way away from the node where your data is actually stored, and there could be good reasons for storing that data there. It could be a regulatory thing. It could be that you have to domicile your data in a particular area, but you still want to run queries in different areas. That it's quite valid. You might need to force that data to be located in a particular area, and then your execution time is going to be quite large as well because
one of the interesting if I could just sorry to interrupt, Alistair, but one of the most interesting things as a developer is developing this new breed of globally distributed applications.
Yes.
And because things have to be so distributed, it means that we have to bring a lot of new thinking to the problem of designing good applications, and it's an exciting problem to have. I mean, it's it's pretty good when you're up against the speed of light as your adversary. But CockroachDB brings a lot to the table to help manage that, and it helps you create the globally distributed application that, as much as possible, puts the data where your customers need to access it the quickest. And there have been tons of different solutions to this problems over the years. The beauty of CockroachDB is that it solves this problem within the context of a single logical database, and gives you the familiar tables and rows that you're used to, with a lot of controls to help position it. And then I spoke yesterday about the query optimizer. It's really advanced, and it does parallel, globally optimized in a kind of I'm using the term globally optimized in two senses at once, but it takes that big picture of how to solve these problems and give good results. So it's pretty. It's a great time to be a software developer, and it's a great time to be a database developer in that world, because the problems are really exciting.
Yeah,
and I think the important thing there is that if you don't get your basic query plan working nicely, if you don't optimize your query, then stretching it across the planet and introducing these kind of latencies from the speed of light is not going to help you. You need to have a good plan to start with.
Yeah, exactly. So where does that good plan, is that before you do query optimization, are you thinking about your application as you are building out your application? Are you also thinking about where the data is going to reside as a performance queue, or can you kind of forget about that until later in the development cycle?
You could do those two things separately. So you could tune your query, you could create your schema and optimize your queries the best you can, and then somebody else might be thinking about where your data might be going, and Cockroach handles that. You describe to Cockroach where you want your data to be placed, and then those query plans will be executed across however you've placed your data.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I interrupted you in the middle of your demo.
That's all right.
Want to bring up your mover screen again? I don't want to share your screen while you're showing us. There you go.
Okay, so we identified this as running most of the time, in the vast majority of the time, in this database. I had to introduce this. Even most of the mover queries were so well optimized that even dropping indexes didn't really help in order to kind of demonstrate this. So I put this in myself. Obviously, you can see that's my query that I'm firing off lots and lots of times to make it look bad.
I love it.
This is exactly what Stephen told us not to do yesterday, which was to scan the entire table. He talked about statistics. We can see here that we know that we are scanning 41,000 rows, which is 100% of the table, just to get anybody who might be called Alistair out of there. And the stats were last collected 21 minutes ago. So we know that they're pretty recent, and that's probably a reasonably good picture, and it knows roughly how much work it's got to do. But in this case, because if I describe which table is this, users, if I describe the users table, it's only got its primary key, the name, which is part of this clause here, the filter here, name like Alistair. There's no index on name. There's nothing there. So it can't do anything really. All it can do is scan the entire table. It hasn't got a lot of choice.
Nice.
So what we need to do, I would guess the best thing to do in this case would be to create an index, which is really easy if you can spell.
You can spell. Just take your time.
Yeah, create index. You don't have to name indexes. You can call them anything you like, but you don't have to name them. So I can just do create index on users. And in this case, I'm just going to put name. Now that gets created online. All of those queries and updates and everything that's going on in this database. This could have took appreciably longer if it was a much bigger, like you were asking yesterday, Rain, would these operations take longer if the tables were bigger? Absolutely. If it was a massive table, it could have taken minutes or even hours sometimes if it was so big, to create that index. But all the time, everything would be online. All the transactions and select and everything would have been going on, and been they might have been slightly slowed down by it, but they certainly would not have been affected so much that they wouldn't work. So we now have an index. We can redo the describe, show that now, and it created an automatic name for that user's name index, fairly obvious on that name. And then we can now redo the explain for that exact same query. It's a bit better. So now it's estimating a row count of, I'm not in the database, obviously. So we're estimating 0 rows, which is less than 0.01% of the table with those stats, which are now 29 minutes old. And it's scanning that index, Alistair, the range here. It's gone from the R to the S there. It's just scanning that little bit of the index there, of the name index. And then it has to, because I did select star, I think, yes, select star, I have to go and get the rest of the data. The index only contains the name and enough information to get back to the primary key, which is the primary key columns. And then it will find the rest of the information it needs from that index join. In this case, it hasn't got any work to do because there are no rows coming back. But that is going to work much, much quicker. And what I'm going to find now is over time, obviously it's got an hour's worth of data here. If I rerun this over the next hour or so, I'll see this start to come down, because immediately that statement, which is running so many times, will be so much quicker. And then this one will pop up to be the top query eventually, when the statistics of the runtime statistics have kind of rolled forward a little bit. So that was an example of how we could do that, put it into practice, what Stephen was showing yesterday. That's
very cool. Yeah, my questions were born out of this talk that I've been working on for a few weeks for Extract Summit, which is actually happening right now in Europe. And my talk is in an hour and 15 minutes. About data types and when you use when you would use one kind of database versus another, when you would use one kind of data structure, and specifically they asked about data lakes. And so like I did all this research on data lakes and data warehouses, by the way, which is the other complementary big data format. And I just learned so many things that now when someone says something like warehouse, I'm like, "Ooh, is that a data warehouse?" And also things like processing time and all this stuff. So that's definitely was in the front of my mind yesterday and today, which is where a lot of my questions came from yesterday.
Cool.
Yeah, big data.
Now, I did mention it earlier that this pesky rat. I love the name these Cockroach Cloud instances are named. Yes. This pesky rat is not a free tier, and the reason it's not a free tier is because I wanted to show something else. Let me just go on to here, so that it's part of Cockroach Cloud, but it is a dedicated instance. So there's more you can see on the Cockroach Cloud console. If I look at my free tier, I've got basically overview and SQL users. That's going to improve. A lot of this is going to come for free tier in the future, not too distant future. But at the moment, you need a dedicated instance to get these kind of things. And so, for example, the statements page. So I can see this in a much more easy to read sort of way. I can see, and there's a column over here which is useful, which is percentage of all runtime. So if I order by that, the percentage runtime, all statements with this fingerprint, I can see 90% of the time it's running this one statement, and then I go over here, that's that select star from users, and I can drill down into it. I can see the logical plan. Now, obviously at the moment it is it's fixed already, so I can see the new logical plan. It's been updated exactly as we saw on the on the CLI there, telling me that it's very efficient at the moment. But previously, I should have shown this first actually, that it puts in red here, full scan.
Nice.
On this, if you are running something that is a full scan.
It's basically telling you this is not very optimized. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to be doing this? I love that. Subtle.
Yes. And in fact, I've seen some improvements that are coming down the track that will enable you to give you a tab to go on and say, well, what's wrong with my database? And full table scans, full scans is one of the things that will be picked out by that in the future.
Nice.
Not too distant future. What I was going to show here also is diagnostics. So with diagnostics, what you could do is basically say, well, this plan, I know that's the plan, but I want to see where it's spending its time. So I activate statement diagnostics, and that will then ask the Cockroach cluster to, next time it sees that running, get a bundle. It'll create a bundle which you can download, which will have all sorts of information in there: the schema, the plan, the query, what it spent its time executing on, and that kind of thing. So that's really useful.
That's so cool. And right now, this is currently only offered in dedicated, but this feature is coming. It's coming.
Yes, so you can see it in dedicated. Yes, it is. Yes, you can see it in dedicated on the actual Cockroach Cloud cluster, or you can follow this tab here, the monitoring tab, which puts you through to the DB console.
Nice.
And that's where basically these views come from, is a DB console. DB console's got a little bit more. It's got a lot of that we've just seen, but it's got this really useful thing here, which is metrics. So you can see the use. Now, actually, I think, was this when I created that index? It's about then, isn't it? A few minutes ago. And you can see that the number of inserts, red is inserts there, and black is selects, that number suddenly jumped up. And the equivalent graph here, which is the service latency, the average service latency,
nice.
At the same time, these tend to go opposite these two. If you've got some really heavy work going on in your database, it restricts the number of SQL statements, restricts the throughput of your system. So that suddenly the shackles were taken off, and instead of having to run that query with its really bad plan all that time, now, because the service latency, the time to execute the query, has come down so much, the whole system could do more work.
Nice.
So that's really good.
Yeah, and while we are mostly on the weekly module and today's office hours, we are trying to make this generic enough that it's not just about dedicated, but also about all of CockroachDB as a whole. Sometimes there are times when we want to show a feature that's in the pipeline for CockroachDB as a whole, but is only currently available in dedicated. And if you're interested, frankly, in any of the features that you see in dedicated, you want them in free tier, or that you don't see in dedicated but see somewhere else and you want them in Cockroach Cloud, frankly, come and post that on Cockroach Forum or directly in our GitHub as a request. Those feature requests are vital to, cannot promise or guarantee that they'll be incorporated immediately or even in the next development cycle, but we want to hear about those requests in particular. What would make your life easier? And really the best pathway for that is on forum.cockroachlabs.com and GitHub. Or here. Here would be great too. So what else do you want to show us today, Alistair?
Well, actually, I just spotted something that we talked about yesterday, that actually when I ran this query saying what are the top 10 kind of long-running things on my database, here was create statistics. So nice. So because the workload is running and we're using the standard defaults, which are that as data is changed in your table, the statistics become increasingly out of date, increasingly stale, and therefore we need to gather them every so often. And I can't remember the exact, whether is it 20% of the rows have to be changed or modified in some way, or there's a time limit as well. There are various heuristics within Cockroach to decide when stats are stale and really should be updated. And then this will run in the background. The creates, I think that must be, it's not giving the table name there. That'll be a reference, an ID for the table, with options throttling. So the throttling means this is a background activity. What we do not want this to do is to slow everything else down.
Right.
So the throttling means if there's something more important going on, i.e. user queries, application queries, don't slow those down. And I think this is a percentage, you throttle it down. And as of system time means don't look at current data. You don't need to look right up to the current second. Look a few seconds back, and that way you won't interfere with any changes that are happening on the database. And you can see that quite a lot of these have actually shown up as long-running operations. So there's 60, 57, 58. We can sort of select those by, so say take 60, we can do select star from, I think it's system.namespace. It's another internal table. Basically tells us what, where ID is equal to 60. Can't spell where. There, so it's one of our tables, vehicle location histories. I think 57 was another one, so we can find out what that was. That was the users table. So yeah, that's just showing what Stephen and Jesse were showing yesterday.
That's so cool. Actually, that reminds me, Jesse reached out this morning and was like, hey, I made a mistake yesterday when she was talking about UUIDs and the size of UUIDs. And she said, they're 128-bit, 16 bytes. Not what I said yesterday. And I was like, I think that's okay. We all make mistakes. It's all good.
Yes, I think she was trying to say that they won't be as long as they look on the screen. So if we do select one row back from the vehicles table, select star from vehicles, and I can just do. I almost said where row number is less than one. That's my Oracle days coming back to me. I'm going to use the limit clause. That's what I need to use.
Nice.
So I did it. I ran that so many times. It's ingrained. So there is a UUID. Obviously, this is printed out using this many characters, but actually, each pair of characters is a byte. That's I think half a byte's called a nibble, isn't it? So that's each character is a nibble.
Itsy bitsy.
So it will not take that much space up.
Yeah.
Although I have seen people generate a UUID in their application and then store it as a string, in which case it will.
Yes, I've done that.
Yeah.
It will take that amount of space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I helped develop an application that did just that, and the benefits of the UUIDs outweighed the cost of the storage space for those strings.
Oh,
and
cool.
then string comparisons are slower than binary comparisons too. So there are lots of reasons why the binary UUID in CockroachDB is a good data type.
That's awesome.
So cool. So Alistair, how often do you find that as you are having a database that's kind of out there, a given, maybe developed by some other people, how often do you think that it's important to run these types of tests that actually discern what queries are the most important? I mean, getting back to kind of what drove your investigation into this, how can you know what queries are most important? How often is it important to ask that question during the course of the software development life cycle?
In those 20 years as an operational DBA, the number of times we experienced these kind of problems, so the problem we just looked at here, the restricted throughput, the long execution times, and also we look at the hardware. The hardware would have been, the CPU would have been higher, drop down, as a result of running queries more efficiently. A number of times we hit this in production, 99% of the time.
Wow.
Often teams are not doing enough performance testing. And these systems, database systems, are so complex that you can't just run low volumes and low numbers of transaction rates against them and say, I'll extrapolate that.
Happy.
Yes,
Publish.
that does 5% the CPU. So if I did 20 times more load, that would be 1 CPU. But it doesn't work like that. No, these systems are so complex that you really need to make things as realistic as possible.
Yeah.
And if you have a non-functional test environment, pre-prod environment, whatever you call it, the one that looks close to your production environment, and you know what your typical sort of rates of transactions and queries is going to be. Obviously, you don't always know how many customers you're going to get. If it's a new service, you haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
But you can make an estimate. You will have estimates of how many customers you think you're going to have, what type of operations they're going to be doing. And the more realistically you can simulate that, the better idea you'll have as to whether you've got enough hardware, whether you've got enough nodes in your cluster, whether you've optimized your queries, lots of different things. Now, the nice thing people always used to say about these pre-prod environments, I can't justify spending as much on my pre-prod environment as I do on my production environment. That's going to cost me a fortune. I'm not going to test it in production. What am I going to do? Well, again, there's Cockroach Cloud to the rescue.
Yeah.
We could just fire up we can go onto the console and say, well, we know what production looks like. We can provision another cluster. We'll just fire a new cluster up, make it look like production, and we'll do a day or 2 days worth of testing, and then we'll rip it down afterwards. We'll analyze the results and rip it down afterwards. That's the beauty of the cloud. There's no excuse.
Do you two have a favorite performance testing tool or process that you use? I mean, maybe that's Cockroach Cloud.
That's a great question. And to answer it, it helps to kind of look at it from two perspectives. You can test the performance of the database by going straight to the database. And that's valuable to gain one perspective on performance. But another thing you can do is you can drive your application through its own API, through its web browser screens, or through any APIs that it surfaces, and that will test performance in a different way. Obviously, it'll test more of the stack, and so the contribution to the overall performance by the database might be obscured, but both are complementary, and they're both very valuable. There's a popular tool called JMeter that's well known in the web web app development world for testing web servers. But what people don't know quite as much is that it's an excellent tool for directly hitting the database and doing straight to the database load testing.
That's Apache JMeter, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's a good tool. It's not the only one. There are lots of other tools, a whole ecosystem of different tools out there. But I think that as an application developer, I want to isolate the database and do some testing on it, but not stop there. Also test it in the context of the application as a whole, because that will often reveal other types of issues, sometimes issues that are database related, but they're at a level above, like the load balancer or connection pooling issues and things like that. And I've seen those types of things more than once.
Yeah. And what about you, Alistair?
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up on that one, and you can look at if you don't think you're load balanced well, you can look at the number of connections at runtime.
Nice.
Now,
is this dedicated or cloud?
This is it's dedicated in Cockroach Cloud. So you've got dedicated hardware,
right?
But you can check, open SQL sessions and work it out per node and make sure that you've not. I couldn't understand why it wasn't showing multiple node there, but this is only a single node cluster, and it will basically you can work out if you've got an imbalance on your load balancer there, and make sure you're spreading your node out across all the nodes that you've got available. But I'd also echo that you don't always know what SQL is going to be run against the cluster. That particularly microservices architectures these days are so complex that most of the developers don't even know what SQL is going to be executed. They might be using an ORM like Hibernate. They might be writing in high-level constructs in their code. They don't really know what SQL is going to be run against the database. So really the best way to test it is to run, as Stephen says, pump some transactions into your APIs, into your microservices, and run realistic transactions through them. And then you might get some surprises. You might say, well, hang on a minute, why is it running this SQL statement? Why is it doing that? Oh, does it need to run this every second? And you'll find all sorts of interesting things about what your application stack and your ORM has done with how you programmed it and what it actually runs against the cluster. So best to get the surprises in
pre-production. Yes, definitely. Break things in experimental mode so that you don't break in production. Also, can we talk about backups?
For sure.
And the only reason I bring this up is I worked in support for years and years and years, and man, that server would crash, and that data would be gone.
It's worth saying that although CockroachDB is highly available, high availability is not a substitute for backups.
Yeah.
So it's a great part of operational, readiness and deployment to make sure you have that backup strategy in place. CockroachDB supports both full backups and incremental backups, and it makes it really easy to do that. And then, of course, test your backups. The worst thing in the world is when you actually need that backup and you try to do the restore and there's something wrong with it. So that should be part of your operational strategy as well. I'll tell an interesting war story that kind of also illustrates a feature of CockroachDB, and that is that CockroachDB supports time travel queries. In fact, if I can share right quick, I will jump to the part of the talk that I was giving yesterday that I kind of cut off in the interest of time, and I'll just share this, and let me click it and share. And so again, I'm not going to try to talk to the slides a lot, but just to help understand what I mean by time travel query, because I'm really still talking about backups. But
I'm already fascinated. You said time travel.
Yes. So you can ask CockroachDB what was the data in the database at some time in the past. We call that a time travel query. So here's an example. We're looking at this accounts table. It says select name and balance from accounts. And then we've got this really cool time travel syntax. As of system time, in quotes, -1H, 1 hour ago. And then the query has the rest of the where clause. So this is asking, don't give me the latest data. Give it to me as it was 1 hour ago. And that's really, really amazing. It doesn't go back unlimited in time. You can go back in time to as far back as to CockroachDB's garbage collection interval. And that's 25 hours by default. And that's a configurable setting. But it's a really cool feature of CockroachDB. Now, you can also use it for higher performance. And when you use it for performance, we change the name, but it's the same syntax. So time travel queries become what we call follower reads. And it's the same thing, except if I'm going to go back and forth. Notice it's instead of saying as of system time -1 hour, it just simply has this function, follower read timestamp. And that simply is a dynamically computed value that says, give me the data that's as recent as possible. But I want to have this, this performance benefit that I get from asking for older data. As we have said, CockroachDB provides transactionally consistent, up-to-date data. But you can actually get higher performance if you're willing to take data that's maybe 4, 5, 6 seconds old in the past. And that reduces a lot of the contention and different sessions and statements maybe contending for the same data. But so same syntax, different concepts. If you're looking in the past, you call it a time travel query. and you're looking in the past because of a business reason. If you're
Right.
trying to get a higher performance, get that performance kick, it's the same syntax, but you call it a follower read. Now the point of all this in the context of backups is there was a situation where someone deleted a table. Just the table is gone, and they were like, "What do we do about this?" Because of the time travel capability in CockroachDB, you can issue a backup, but tell it, I don't want to back up the database as it is now. I want to back up the database as it was, say, 2 hours ago, and back up your deleted table, and then
Right.
restore it, and boom, you've got it back.
That's awesome.
It's just an interesting war story about how
I
time
love
travel
that.
queries and the backup and restore feature intersected to enable you to actually back something up after you've lost it, quote unquote.
Nice. Now I do have to point something out, and maybe this is only me. Are you familiar with Doctor Who?
Oh yeah.
Because I'm going to have to recommend strongly that instead of the name being, was it Blake or something, that maybe you say the name is Doctor Who in the code. Just saying. It's perfect for time travel queries. It's perfect. It's
That's
a little
great.
little Easter egg that can go in there. We don't want to get in trouble with BBC, but you can't resist.
Of course, now you have to tell us who your favorite Doctor is.
Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but I am a huge fan of the 13. Even though I'm non-binary, huge fan of actually having a woman actress. And we have a time travel question, but it's not Doctor Who based.
No.
I'm so disappointed. I'm just kidding. I'm hugely happy that you have a question. Little question for supporting time travel queries. Does CockroachDB maintain multiple versions of data?
Yes.
Within that garbage collection time frame, it maintains every version of the data that has existed. So if you're using the default CockroachDB settings of 25 hours for that garbage collection interval, you can get every value within the last 25 hours. And CockroachDB, the term is multi-version concurrency control, MVCC, and so that is technology in CockroachDB.
That's awesome.
Now, you may not want that. If you've got a particular row that you're updating millions of times an hour, you may decide you don't really want to maintain
25 hours. Right.
I don't need it. I'm never going to want to go back that distance in time. I just want to store. I can reduce it down. The problem is I can't take it too far down. Otherwise, all of this wonderful infrastructure with the backups and the restores won't work. If I'm running incremental backups every hour, say, I can't take my garbage retention down below an hour, because then I won't be able to maintain the history throughout backups and restores.
Exactly.
So there are limitations, but you don't have to go to anywhere near the 25 hours if you don't need to.
Alistair, what's your favorite Doctor?
David Tennant.
Yes. So I actually watched I think my first Doctor was 6, the Scarf. You know who I'm talking about. Old school Scarf.
Tom Baker.
Thank you, Tom Baker. Like, names sometimes I'm just like, Tom Baker was my first Doctor. And I remember watching it on VHS in
that's great.
The early 90s at my godmother's house. And I was like, there was the very first show that I saw, the robot alien was in a swimming pool that was cloudy. And it ruined me for swimming pools that had too much chlorine for years after that. I was like, no, there's an alien.
Wow. There's an opportunity here. We can come up with a time travel demo that uses all kinds of references to Doctor Who and put some Easter eggs in there. That would be fun.
Okay, this is happening. I'm gonna definitely. I'm gonna work with you on this. This is something we could do on the modules days on Wednesdays. Is maybe we have like a casual coding day where we're building out an app, like a time query, a time travel query demo. Like that, to me, that would be awesome. Actually, that's kind of what I do every Friday. Is build out apps or play with new open source projects on my own stream. But yeah, this is happening. A Doctor Who time travel query demo, definitely. And then we have a follow-up. 25 hours is the limit, otherwise it will blow up. Yes. Given this feature, it implies that we need to have a good stringent observability for GC logs. Absolutely. Do y'all want to speak to that in detail?
Well, all of these different versions will take up space. So you could end like if your database is very dynamic and you're updating it rows all the time, then your actual data might be so big, say it's 1 terabyte, but you might be storing 25 terabytes of data because you've got so many changes. So yeah, you've got to set these values sensibly. If you're never going to need a time travel query to go back that far, then don't store the data. It's just going to waste you space and waste you money.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the limits of Cockroach Cloud free tier is there is a 5 gig, 10 gig. What is the limit on that?
I think it's 5 on free tier.
Yeah. But like 10 million queries or something. Like the query number is huge, and then the actual storage space relatively could be considered low, depending.
You'd think these days 5 gig is not very much, but I create a new database for every little project I'm doing, and it's amazing how much you can fit in there. It is another Doctor Who reference. It's like a TARDIS, you see.
Hey! Best day ever. Thank you so much. Yes, come back here every Thursday, 12 o'clock Eastern time, United States Eastern time, whatever channel you're watching us on. We're multicast streaming on several different channels. So wherever you'd like to pop in, we see you're on YouTube. Welcome. We'd love to have you back. We are at the top of the hour. Is there anything that you all want to add today about, like, what was your favorite question? What was your favorite demo? I mean, obviously, we're all happy about Doctor Who. And next week, we are talking with Alistair again about practical Python. Yeah? Can you give us a maybe 30-second preview about what we're going to play with?
Yeah, so I'm going to use Jupyter Notebooks because I think that's a great way to teach and learn Python. So you can sort of stop at various points and have a look at what you've got, what's happening. Nice. And we're going to have a look at a few fun facts about Python as well, and some of the history of Python. And
nice.
We're going to have some fun.
Are we? Wow, that question came and left in 3 seconds. There it is. Is the lab already available on our GitHub repo?
Not yet, but it will be when I finished it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And do you have a timeline for that? No pressure. Tomorrow? I'm just kidding. But our module is Wednesday. I would love to get a preview of it on Monday or Tuesday, if possible.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I'll get the stuff up tomorrow. Yeah. I've got the notebook already finished, and that can go up, and then the instructions of how to run it. Yeah.
That's awesome. I can't wait to play. Yeah. Noob to databases. Love playing in Python. So thank you so much to everybody who visited us today and said hello, especially I'm going to brutally, let me try, Vamsi Krishna, Naluri, who had great comments and questions. We also had a lurker, which is awesome. You are totally welcome to lurk as well. And longtime lurkers, first-time callers, also welcome. Thank you to Alistair and Steve for joining me today, Enterprise Architects. Why? I keep switching them. Enterprise Architects is Cockroach Labs. I am Ray Leander, developer advocate with Cockroach Labs. And we will see you next Wednesday for a module for Algebra Python with Alistair Parry. And next Thursday at 12 Eastern for more office hours. Cannot wait. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.